So hello and welcome back, or welcome to the Limitless Talk, Limitless You Coaching by Katie podcast with, of course, me, Katie, and I'm delighted to say that not only will this be available on Spotify, but also for the first time, this episode is going to be uploaded to my YouTube page, which is Limitless You Coaching by Katie. So for everybody watching, I am so sorry for having to look at my face and my not so clean hair, but we will move on from that. And this episode is slightly different, and I think that's why this was a good one to do for the first time of YouTube. So my phone's on airplane mode, it's just me and you having a conversation. So I wanted to talk about, and if I say a couple of words today, it's going to form what our conversation is going to be all about today. Death, dying, funeral. 3 words. Why, if you don't know who I am, for example, am I mentioning such big words, big scary words probably to a lot of us? Well, if I take it right back to 30th of October 1996 when I was born into a family where my parents were 2 years into a journey of building first generation of independent funeral director business, both directors of the company, and still just about to celebrate our 30th year as an independent funeral director. They're still going. So from the moment I was born into the funeral industry. And you know, I never ever wanted to go into the business, and you know, I hated school, came out of school, went to do I was interested in business. I came out of school, went to do college course on business, learn a bit about it. Growing up, yeah, you do have an actual thing where you're learning about what your dad and your mum does, you know, about business. It's in the household, it's around the dinner table at times. So long story short of it, finished the college course. The business needed some help for a couple of days due to staffing, holidays. You know, it was a busier time, if I can say it like that. And we're in 2024 now, and that was in July of 2014. We are now on the 26th of June of 2024, and next month on the 14th of July 2024, I will celebrate having worked with the company for 10 years, and I am only still 27. So that's the background of it. So the word death, dying and funeral now makes sense, and if it doesn't already, it will become a bit more. So why am I going to talk about, or why am I relating this conversation we're having today with those 3 words? Well, it's something that I don't share very often about it, and it's something that I've maybe not been as honest about at times as I should be. And it's this. I used to have a fear of dying. I used to have a fear of death. Now, that fear of death, that fear of dying, isn't 100% solved, because, let's face it, it's something that at one point or another in life we will all have to deal with. It will all happen to ourselves. But to work in that industry, to have a fear of death, it doesn't make sense. But it does. And I'm going to break it down in this conversation we're having today. I was scared because I know what goes on in the care of a deceased, how a funeral is started to the moment it finishes on the day of the funeral. And just like the thought of, is there an afterlife, all these unanswered questions that we don't have, and a point of mental health and wellbeing side took its toll on me, to the point where at times I was very, very paranoid. Now, I don't even know if my own parents know this, so if they are listening to this, you are getting some whole host of information that you did not know before. But yeah, I had a fear of dying. I will not say that it's a fear of dying that's disappeared. What I will say is it's a fear of dying that's controlled now. A few years ago, you know, having mental health and all of that and being in a really, really crappy, rubbishy place, to now being in a place of control, a place where I'm able to look at curiosity of, like what I mentioned in a previous episode about trauma, what happened in my youth, you know, exploring all of that, you know, that if something happened to me today, and it's a conversation I had actually earlier on today, if something happened to me today, it would actually be okay. I've came to terms with that. But 5 years ago, I would never have been able to confidently say that. And it's kind of got me thinking, like, why is it that through the years, yes, death is not as much as a taboo subject now, but it was. You know, a lot of us pre-plan our funeral and we've still got another 20, 30, 40 years behind us, you know, but it's taken that away from your family, it's given them a peace of mind, and it's giving you a sense of control, ensuring that your wishes are carried out. And it's such a great topic to talk about, and that sounds bizarre, but I mean it in the sense of mental health wise and well-being wise. And I've had many experiences sitting with a family over the years of planning a funeral, and the person sitting in front of me, they've not passed away yet, they're pre-planning it. They've not got a fear of dying. They're not afraid to talk about death. And they're not afraid to use the word funeral. And that fascinates me from a well-being point of view. If I was a previous version of myself, and if you think about if you were a previous version of yourself, would you be able to talk about the subject of death, of dying, of funerals? Would you be able to have a conversation with a friend, with a family member, in an environment around your work colleagues? Like, would you be able to do that? Maybe not as well as you can now. And it comes back to when I got sick in 2020 and took 3 months out of working to look after myself and find a place where I could be back in the world again, if I can say it like that. I went back into that world completely different. I went back into that world knowing that I couldn't be fearful of it. And getting over a fear or being in control of a fear is really, really difficult. Some days are better than others. And I find it fascinating that actually dealing with a family, helping them carry out the funeral of a lost loved one, you know, getting the humbling and privileged experience to help them create the funeral that they know has been what needed to be for their loved one, is such a unique and powerful experience, an inspirational experience, because you get to learn about that individual that you represent, you know, the deceased that's in your care. You get to do all of that. And it comes down to, like, why should I be scared to die? Why should I be scared? Why am I? How did I get that? When is it going to go away? When is it this? All these thoughts go through my head, and at one time it did consume me. And I think the point of me trying to put this out here in this episode is a few different reasons, actually. One, I don't want the topic of death to be a taboo subject. I want it to be a normal conversation that even on a Saturday night, you're out for dinner, your friends and family, it can be talked about. Dying isn't and doesn't need to be a bad experience. Okay, there is many of us out there that can say that yes, it is a bad experience. Grief is a horrible, horrible thing to go through, and everyone deals with it in a different way. But a lot of people, and especially when they talk about like places in Switzerland and all around the world about euthanasia, they can be in control of that, and that brings a level of they have the last say. They know how it's going to happen for them. So dying to them, they can be in control of that, and in a mindset and well-being side, you get it. You understand why that person has gained that level of satisfaction, that they want to do that for themselves. And death should be a subject that we should be able to talk about. A funeral should be able to talk about. When you see a hearse, don't be afraid of that hearse. It's changing the narrative. And I had a conversation about this a while ago, and I said, you know, I know that you don't like driving past a hearse when it's on a busy road, you know, and if you're able to overtake. But you need to think that hearse is taking that person that perhaps lived the most fulfilled life and makes us living life quite boring, is about to be celebrated, has a specific hour in a crematorium or an hour in a church to have their life celebrated. That's the way that we should be looking at it. And then it brings back to the point, okay, so if I am now happy that if something happened to me today and I died tomorrow, and I would be okay with that, having come out the other side of really being paranoid and overcome by being very, very scared by the thought, is A, what do I want my last words to be? If that was a question, what would your last words want to be to people? My last words would be, never give up on yourself. Always be yourself, your honest, authentic self, and live life to your full potential, because your full potential is in you. And that's amazing. It's really key. Everybody has it within them, you just need to find it. And then it comes down to, I've said my last words, I've passed away, and it's my funeral. And someone's going to be a master of ceremony at my funeral, and they're sitting with my family and they're asking about my life to form a service out of that. What do I want my family to say to that person that's then making up a service to go and stand in front of the 2 people that might go to my funeral? It might be tens of thousands, who knows? And what do I want that service to be? Obviously you want that service to be about the fulfilled life, the happiness in your life that you've had. But I actually want my funeral to be, I'm thinking about it, an opportunity for learning and educating others on the challenges that I've faced, how I was able to get through it, and the fulfilment and happiness coming from how I got out at the other side. I've sat at many funerals, and okay, it's maybe not a time for the struggles, but my struggles are a part of me. My trauma is a part of me. My motivations and my confidences are a part of me, because they've not always been there. I've had to work hard to get them. So I think my funeral needs to represent that. And I actually think, when I think on it really, really well, and I think on it a lot now, I actually want someone who's going to take my funeral to stand up and say, do you know that Katie was really, really scared of death? I really want them to stand up and say that. I want to have like a jaw-dropping moment where, yeah, I was scared of it. I'm not scared. I mean, this video's on YouTube if you're listening on Spotify. I might be telling you as a stranger I've got a massive fear of death. But yeah, I've been around the funeral industry all my life and I work in it. I'm now taking a role where I'm looking to raise the well-being of those who work within the industry. I still do have a fear of death, it's just not as extreme as it used to be, as consuming as it used to be. But I want people to know that at my funeral, because that's a challenge that I've had to face and come out the other side of, and put my motivations and confidences, habits, positivity, everything that I know in terms of well-being and mental health, into controlling that fear, that scarcity that I have, and actually use it as a motivation in the elements of my life. And that's why I'm doing this podcast. But I just thought it was so right for me to share it on here, to have a conversation with you. Like, have you ever talked about death? Have you ever thought about dying? Have you ever actually been to a funeral? I still know people that have never been to a funeral. And of course, none of us want to go to one. But it is actually an experience that you want to have, because you want to have that experience to celebrate someone's life, but to come out feeling inspired from what you've heard about that person and use it to your advantage. A lot of times I think about, and I wake up and I say this affirmation to me, I always wake up and I think, I am alive today. I have another opportunity to use the fact that I'm alive and make today a good day. Now, there'll be some of you listening thinking, what is she talking about? But all of this has a connection. Just because you are alive doesn't mean you don't face challenges. It doesn't mean that you're happy all the time. It doesn't mean that you're not going through a painful time, or that you're not preparing for what the future may or may not hold. And that's what it brings down to, because the last thing that will ever happen to you will be that you die, and that death will have to be spoken about, whether you know that death is imminent or whether you don't. And that's quite powerful. And I know I feel like I've rambled on, but it just highlights the point. And if I can ask you to walk away from this episode, I'd probably split it up into 2. And I'd be like, what are you scared of? And no, I'm not saying it's death, but are you got a fear of something? Are you scared of something? You know, what could you actually do to make it and use it to your advantage the way that I have in mind? So we could share in our experience, okay, we could, different end of the scales and what it could be, but we share that understanding and know what it's like to have a challenge and let it consume you, to work through it and be in control of it. And the second part would be, what do you want your funeral to be? Are you scared of death? Would you talk about death? What do you want your last words to be before you leave the world? And what do you want said about you at your funeral? Because we never ever think about that. We're too busy getting the kids ready for their clubs, socialising, weddings, all that sort of thing. Like, life takes over. And because life takes over, you then don't think about actually when it comes back to reality or these sort of things, what may or may not happen and how you can be prepared for all that. And that's where fear and scarcity comes in as well. So if you can put your fears, your scarcity, your whatever into actually something good, then it can pay dividends. But it's important to share that, yeah, I might work in an industry that gets the humble and privileged experience to help family, but it doesn't mean that I'm not affected by it. And one of the parts of my being affected by it was that my fear of death overtook me for a period of time. And I had to hide that. I had to hide it. So don't hide how you feel about feeling fearful or feeling scared. Your fears and your scares are yours. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise or let it affect you. You know, you're human at the end of the day. We're all human. We're all alive today. We're all making today a chance to be good. Tomorrow could be a bit better. Tomorrow might be a harder day than what today was, but you know how to get through it. And that's the point of it all. We don't want to be talking about death or funerals or dying for a long, long time yet. So let me bring it back to the present and, you know, share my affirmation with you to finish off. You are alive today. You can make today a good day for you, and you can make tomorrow just as good as what today is. And remember to celebrate the fact that you're alive today. And when you wake up tomorrow, celebrate the fact that you're alive again. Simple as that. And I know this episode was probably quite heavier than the other ones, but it was a chance to do something a little bit different. To think of fear and scarcity a different way, to focus a little bit on death and dying. I'm a funeral director, why wouldn't I bring up that topic? But it's also to highlight and keep the conversation going, because it's important now more than it ever has. When it's such a changing world, and even though you're alive today, yes, we don't know what is going to happen in a few hours, tomorrow, a week, fortnight, year, whatever. It's important to remember the point. So thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you've taken a lot away from that, and just remember that your fears are your fears, but don't be fearful of your fears.